European Commissioner, I was dreaming to have him more often, or not more often, but sometimes in our school also to come to lecture. Janez Potočnik is an economist. He served as a director of Institute of Macroeconomic Analysis and Development in Ljubljana. And he was appointed chief of negotiating team for accession of Slovenia to the European Union and served as a minister responsible for European affairs. He joined 2004 when Slovenia joined the European Union. He joined the European Commission as a commissioner responsible for science and research. And in 2010, he became commissioner for environment. And of course, we shall remember him mostly for that, because this was such a fresh subject then and such an important subject, and it stays as that. After the mandate, he was appointed as a co-chair of UNEP International Resource Panel, and he is also a partner at SYSTEMIQ and one of the founders of the System Transformation Hub. I'm sure that in his lecture today, he will tell us more about all these functions and about all his, his challenges also in his work, because this work is not just the poetry, but it is having also a lot of challenges. With us are Mirjana Matešić, who is a member of the Business Council for Sustainable Development from Croatia. There she is, and she will be.
Hi, everyone.
She will be running later the discussion, and Marina Schmitz, who is also responsible from the Slovenian side and for Become project, because in frame of this Become project is everything happening. And with us is also Asel Kormantaeva from Kazakhstan, who is working in our school also on this project. So this is the team, and I would, because I know that Mr. Potočnik has so much to tell us, that I'm now immediately handing over the session to him. And thank you very much, Janez, to be with us and to share your rich knowledge and experience with us. Thank you very much. And thank you already now to everybody, the big crowd I can see on the screen, who is joining us. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. It's a great pleasure, and thank you for the invitation. Indeed, presentation, it's not short. That's why I will shift immediately to share my screen. And I would just like if you would confirm that everything is okay.
Perfect.
I think it should be. Okay, super. So the title is Resource Management and the Role of the Circular Economy for a Sustainable Future. But let me start with some main challenges, the context and diagnosis of the problem. I think we live in a time which is really strange, and it's practically impossible to start in a different way than with the science which talks about humans and our behavior. So the philosophy. So German philosopher, Georg Hegel said, the only thing we can learn from history is that we learn nothing from history. And our great man, Slavoj Žižek, basically very nicely explained the times in which we are living. It's clear that we are approaching the ecological and digital apocalypse, but we should not lose nerves. Everything under heaven, it's in utter chaos. The situation is excellent. It's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of the capitalism. So that's our starting point. We should understand that basically our generation is the first generation in human history living in socio-ecological system of planetary scope, which means that if you just look to, I don't know, pandemics, climate change, then internet, also global security threats due to nuclear power, nuclear weapon, and so on. So we can easily see that we are more interconnected and interdependent than ever, and that due to that, our individual and collective responsibility has enormously increased. So according to science, we are breaching already 6 out of 9 planetary boundaries. And this concept, which was developed by Kate Rovert, it's very nice. It's very nicely explaining the situation Inside the circle, you see the basic human needs, and outside, which are of course expanding, and outside are the planetary boundaries. So the green space, it's safe operating space, which is of course due to everything what we know basically shrinking. One core problem with which we are constantly discussing, and there are no agreement about that, it's of course about the concept of growth. So I think it's quite clear that we have to shift from an economic system which is based on the notion of unlimited growth to the one which is both ecologically sustainable and socially just. But I do believe that people who talk about degrowth ask the right questions, but I think that no growth, it's not the answer. Growth is simply central characteristic of all life. Society, economy that does not grow will die sooner or later, but growth in nature, it's not linear and unlimited. And the real problem is that majority of mainstream economists and politicians actually talk about this narrow quantitative concept of growth, while biological, ecological sense of development corresponds to the notion of qualitative growth, prosperity, well-being. It's interesting that actually we humans are in a way a result of this qualitative growth in nature based on evolutionary developments. And it would be paradoxical if we would be also the reason to its end. So if we want to avoid extinction of elephants in nature, we must extinct elephants in our rooms. And which are the three main elephants in our rooms? We lack actually attention to the drivers and pressures. So we tend to talk about the consequences a lot, but we don't, can I just say that somebody should mute himself or herself because I constantly hear the sounds. Thanks a lot in advance. So we need to focus on natural resource use and management, as well as on the market signals, which are leading our producers and consumers' behavior. We lack holistic systemic approach. So even the governments are more or less organized in silos. So each one wants to win the battle over the other part of the government, which is just both losing in that way. And we lack the demand side focus. So policy attention, it's really mainly given to the supply side, to cleaning of the wrong economy, while we simply don't ask the question which are connected to overconsumption, to the things which are also attributed to wasteful economic system. And this is leaving out an important solution potential, but also the questions of responsibility and equity. This leads me to our major report in IRP, which we have released last year. So why natural resource view is so important? If you just think thoroughly, access and use of natural resources have been in human history always closely related to the well-being achieved by the nations. Unfortunately, also to stability, security, conflicts. Just think about access to land, water, oil and gas, minerals, precious metals. It was also driving geopolitical efforts of consumption countries to control the resource-rich countries. You can see these examples also nowadays. So the whole history of colonization of nature, it's basically central to fairness and equity. When we talk about materials and resources, what we actually talk about, biomass, fossil fuels, metals, non-metallic minerals. So everything extracted from the earth, we call materials. And if we add land and water, we come to the natural resources, or if you want, resources. One of the conclusions of our report is the economy championed by industrialized nations is wasteful and unjust, and that we must shift away from the prevailing resource wasteful economic approach because it's simply ethically and also ecologically unsustainable. We must set the order right. Economy was actually invented to serve us humans and our needs, and not the opposite. If we look to the trends, in last 50 years, global material use has increased more than for a factor of 3. So all parts have basically increased. But if you look which is the part which was increasing most, it is non-metallic minerals, which is easy to explain. That sand, gravel, and other things which are used to build cities, to build infrastructure, roads, and so on. And this is more or less attributed to the part of the world region where it's the most of population located and when the global economic growth is also the highest nowadays. One of the things which we are looking to is so-called material footprint. Why material footprint? So it's not about who is extracting the materials. It's about who is basically using them through their domestic consumption. So it's domestic extraction plus net raw material trade balance. If we look at last 20 years in Europe and North America, it has basically not increased, but unfortunately the level is much too high. So technological development has neutralized economic development and population growth. While in Africa and West Asia, it has enormously increased, but mainly due to population growth. While in Asia and Pacific and South Europe, it has increased, but mainly due to economic growth. So the global figure, 62% increase, could be explained with 2/3 economic development, 1/3 population growth, and there is a minor neutralization effect by the technology. If we look per capita, then we see that, of course, Europe and in particular in North America are very high, which means that per capita base there, despite the current developments, is much too high, and it would need to go down. When we then ask the question, which are basically those human needs which are most resource intensive? And the answer is pretty straightforward. Built environment, mobility, food, energy constitute 90% of all total global material demand. And if we then look through the country income groups, we get an interesting story of human development. Low-income countries actually use more than half of materials for their food provision. Lower middle-income countries for food provision and housing. Upper middle-income countries for housing and mobility. And we, the developed countries, have pretty much similar shares for different kind of human needs, which is also nicely telling you which is the basic human need and how actually the societies in different environments are evolving. High-income countries use 6 times more materials per capita than low-income countries and are responsible for 10 times climate impacts. So the middle-income countries are really, really growing quickly. And the tragical story is actually low-income countries where we don't notice in these last 20 years any kind of positive developments. One of the conclusions of our work is also that extraction and processing of materials drives all aspects of the triple planetary crisis. We can explain through that 60% of global climate change impacts, 40% of air pollution health impacts, and more than 90% of water stress and global land-related biodiversity loss. So one part of our attention is also equity. If you look to climate impacts, these are those who are actually benefiting most. These are those who are most hit. So the situation is clear. If we look to biodiversity, our figures are showing that low-income countries are experiencing high levels of biodiversity loss due to high-income countries' consumption. So Earth for All, the recent report of Club of Rome, I'm also the member of Club of Rome, is basically coming to a very clear conclusion that negative social tipping points will be actually reached before severe environmental tipping points, and that equity and poverty alleviation are key if we want to be concerned about regenerative economics and decarbonization, which means that social and environmental transition must go hand in hand. Our scenario outlook, which we have modeled, we have actually modeled really the complex way of provisioning systems transformations in built environment, shelter, mobility, energy, and food systems. But one thing which we came to the conclusion is that you can simply not model sustainable future if you do not add also a just transition model. And our historical trend scenario comparing to sustainability transition, these are two which we have done. Sustainability transition is actually showing us even economically better results, not to mention inequality, improved well-being, reduced growth, resource use, reduced environmental impact. So conclusion in one sentence is pathway towards sustainable resource use. It's still possible, but we urgently must change the direction and fix the broken compass. Why? Because solution pathway is simply getting narrower and steeper, and there are less and more urgent options on our policy menu. Which leads me to policy recommendations. So our main policy recommendation is basically this one. We need to decouple the growth of well-being from growth of economics, only economy, both from the use of resources and altogether from environmental pressures. We should, of course, take into account all natural resources and focus on most resource-intensive provisioning systems. If we would like to have a systemic approach, then we should start from the just equitable well-being for all, respecting planetary boundaries. So from this donut approach, then in policy focus on those areas which are most resource intensive. And when we are designing the policies, imagine like you would be solving a Rubik cube. So if you solve just one side, for example, prosperity and competitiveness, but leave the others in chaos, you will have the chaos. So you need to simultaneously try to solve all the sides of the compass, of the cube. Which are the main recommendations coming from our scenarios? Institutionalize resource governance and define resource use path. So basically setting the targets when it comes to resource use. Directing economic incentives and finance towards sustainable resource use. Making trade an engine of sustainable resource use, mainstreaming sustainable consumption options, and finally, creating circular resource-efficient, low-impact solutions and business models. So high-income countries would need to go with their material footprint definitely seriously down, and low-income countries, which are not meeting yet their essential human needs, would of course need to use it per capita more, but the growth should include the resource productivity and circular economy measures. So this is the theory which is behind our approach of absolute decoupling in high-income countries and relative decoupling in low-income countries. Why defining resource use path would be so important? First, it would give natural resources management proper recognition and attention in policy space. Currently, it's not matching energy transition and GHG emissions. Second, it would provide a clear signal to all government services to give proper attention, develop suitable policies, and to private sector that this is the direction to take, leading to new sustainable circular business models. Complement efficiency with sufficiency policies, decarbonization with dematerialization policies, and also provide the missing attention to demand-side solutions. Introduce in international policy debates essential question: who is crossing planetary boundaries through excessive resource use in production and consumption? And finally, effectively address the equity and fairness globally, as well as on national levels, and help closing the gap which is existing among global North and global South countries. The most frequent reaction on this proposal is this is not the right time when policymakers would be ready to set new targets or introduce new institutions. And my answer is, sorry, friends, this is not about setting new targets. It's about adding implementation measures to deliver the already agreed ones in climate change, in biodiversity loss, in social inclusions, in equity, included in SDGs, climate, biodiversity, COPs, where we are simply failing to deliver. So when you are in policymaking, in simplified way, you basically have two options. Either you try to work through the market signals or through the regulation. Currently, market signals do not send producers and consumers in the right direction. So basically, they are signaling producers that extraction-based economic success is most profitable, and they are giving contradictory signals to consumers to behave responsibly, but sorry, you will routinely have to pay more instead of the reverse. So in economic terms, please act stupidly. So to avoid this overregulation, I think it's critical that we would start synchronizing the policy signals, not sending them one way, and market signals, because the current situation is just creating confusion on the markets and leading to resistance and lobbying by affected companies. If I simplify it a bit, then, signals which we are getting are the critical ones, and what are the signals which we are currently getting through the market economy? Production capital, financial capital is overvalued, over-rewarded. Labor, human capital is undervalued and under-rewarded, and natural capital many times not valued at all. So, and by the way, it should have intrinsic value, but immediately when you put it in market, then of course, if it doesn't have value, you will simply destroy it. So if somebody thinks that through that we will get economic, social, environmental balance, wake up. Pavan Sukhdev has nicely summarized that by saying, externalities are today's profits, tomorrow's risks, and future losses. So if we talk about better economic incentives, if we can learn anything from the panic following the introduction of customs duties by Trump administration, is that market signals work. If I give you the fiscal policy example, currently we are judging financial ministers if they are able to keep the budget in balance. But in essence, they are the core persons giving signals to producers and consumers. Why we should not tax more the things we would like to see less, tax less the things we would like to see more, use state subsidies and public procurement just for public purposes and making transition possible. And in the first place, get rid of tax havens, which are escape rooms for rich people and rich companies. So if I summarize this part, Mario Quintana nicely said, don't waste time chasing butterflies, mend your garden and the butterflies will come. Industry needs clear agreed strategic direction, predictability, support of the agreed travel direction, and as good level playing field as it gets, all based on a clear vision designed by policymakers based on science and public interest. Which leads me to the circular economy. Circular economy is just an instrument helping delivering decoupling I was mentioning before, but it's also a kind of part of bigger picture of economic, societal, cultural transformation needed to deliver sustainable development goals. It's basically using common sense. Why? Because all nature on the planet from the beginning is based on circular principles. Nothing is lost, everything has its purpose. And the only serious question there is, are we humans part of nature? And if we are part of nature, why do we not behave accordingly? In circular economy, we have nicely moved from cleaner, longer, leaner, different phases of circularity, but we have not really reached the questions how to minimize product need through better system design. So refuse and rethink strategies. We should be aware that actually we don't need cars, we need mobility, we don't need light bulbs, we need light, we don't need chairs, we need to sit, we don't need refrigerators, we need chilled, healthy food, we don't need CDs, we want to listen to the music, we don't need pesticides, we want healthy plants. So dematerialization, rethinking ownership, efficiency complemented with sufficiency are the right questions. And the main question, which is often overlooked, is this one: how to meet human needs in most energy and resource efficient way. So it's very important also to look at the point of perception. Whenever you are complaining that you are caught in a traffic jam, you are simply wrong. You are traffic jam. So we tend to always project our problem to be objective, but actually we are part of the problem, which leads me now to the climate change. And also, again, to our good friend Slavoj Žižek. In short, the truly courageous stance is to admit that the light at the end of the tunnel is most probably the headlight of the train approaching us from the opposite direction. What are the facts telling us? Global CO2 emissions, the highest last year. Global surface temperature already 1.5, 1.7 degrees according to Copernicus over the pre-industrial level, which is actually the level which we said we should not breach. But I don't see many panicking. The system that moves water around the world is off balance for the first time in human history, according to Global Commission and Economics of Water released last year. Fossil fuel subsidies, according to IMF, 7.1% of GDP still. So this global hypocrisy indicator is pretty much telling us how serious we are about those things. energy transition, it's important. Also, technological development solutions. But climate breakdown is a symptom of ecological overshoot. Material footprint is dangerously under-discussed, and most climate solutions lack focus on the root cause of the crisis. So focus on overshoot highlights the material usage, including fossil fuels. Waste output, the consequence of still prevailing wasteful linear economy, and of course, growth of human society, which has more than doubled in the last 50 years, all of which affect the Earth biosphere. So we should not focus only on production-related energy challenges, but also ask for what the energy will be used. As Hart Hogan nicely summarized, species causing the extinction of 100 species per day does not need more energy to do what they do. So climate change can be effectively addressed only by combining supply-side solutions, so carbon management and energy transition, with decoupling, demand-side solutions, and nature-based solutions. In the current talks, the orange part is far prevailing, and the rest is practically negligible. This links me to the energy transition and critical raw materials, which are currently very much a central part of the discussion. The UN Secretary has nicely put a world powered by renewables. It's a world hungry for critical minerals. He has even established the Critical Energy Transition Minerals Panel. And I think what we are somehow forgetting is that this panel was established due to the need for energy transition, which is actually environmental climate change related challenge. So due to environmental reasons. So indispensable pillars which we today see are supply transition materials with highest environmental and social standards, securing enough supply, in sustainable development through geographic diversification, and they are talking in current policies also about the importance of recycling. But let me tell you why recycling has limited potential. Because we talk about the growing needs. Recycling is a solution in stable needs. But if the needs are growing, if you recycle all the batteries of today, if the needs in 10 years will be 10 times more, this is not the solution. So the solution should be other parts of circularity, more intensive use, lightweighting, lifetime extension, and of course, in the first place, optimizing delivery of human needs in energy and material intensive systems like mobility and buildings. So what is actually in high-income countries really missing in the approach? We are simply projecting future needs according to current needs, and we don't question the baseline. And the baseline is too high. And if we would optimize the baseline, then of course the future needs would be different, and also the solutions to our questions would be different. Is this possible? According to our modeling in GROW, it's possible. So we can mitigate material use by 30% compared to contained historic trends only by just system shifting and energy demand by 25%. Also not questioning our demand side, but just with systemic redistribution and different approach in our economies. For low-income countries, high supply countries, this should be the opportunity for economic and social development. So transition should be just and equitable and providing energy needs for all. And they should benefit from value addition, job creation, long-term resilience, because sustainable mining practices, fair market structures, responsible consumption in high-demand countries are actually essential to ensure that energy transition does not come at the expense of those who basically provide its foundational resources. Finally, about EU developments. Circular economy started with my proposal there in 2014. So we were emerging from the waste legislation, adding then green entrepreneurship action plan and green employment communication, focusing on buildings and food systems, and we were also proposing resource productivity target. I don't know, but probably you are not aware that this was then by the next Commission removed from the agenda. But since it was a huge pressure from, in particular, business community that this is absolutely needed, end of next year, they have proposed the first circular economy action plan. That was December 2015, focusing on eco-design, fertilizers, reuse of wastewater, grain public procurement, funding, secondary raw materials, strategy on plastics and chemicals, products and waste legislation. So important steps. And you all remember the European Green Deal, and Circular Economy Action Plan was, of course, part of the European Green Deal, if you understand it like European Green should actually be understood. Circular Economy Action Plan 2 was then part of this approach, focusing on sustainable product policy framework, on key value chains, and also on the less waste, more value, and complemented with all economic measures which are in this context needed. I'm aware that I'm going quite quickly. You will have possibility to get the slides. I would just like you that you understand the story which is behind. Today, 27 countries in European Union, practically almost majority, have or have it in preparation already circular economy strategies. And it's interesting that Germany, as the first country, has December last year introduced also material footprint target, which is based on IRP recommendations to 6 to 8 tons per capita till 2045. So where we go in European Union? I do believe that European Green Deal indeed kick-started the much needed whole economy and society transformation, and this direction is needed also in the future. But I also understand that new geostrategical reality will make this quite difficult to keep the attention and appropriate developments in environmental area in Europe and also globally. I do believe that Europe is in a kind of strategic crossroad, which I will be a bit simplifying. I see two alternative ways. One is going defensive, more introverted, which is more likely, focusing on security policy, for example, arming ourselves, what we do, which is hardly avoidable, putting political power behind speeding up enlargement process to strengthen safety belt around existing EU, which is, of course, very much needed and welcome. But the sentence which I have heard last 20 years most in European Union is this one. We are one of the biggest economic powers, number 2 trading power in the world, the most important one who is delivering help to the people in need globally, but we are not seriously considered in these international geostrategical relations. And I do believe that if we would want to be something like that, we would need to integrate better 3 areas, fiscal, external, and yes, also defense policies. I can immediately hear people saying, oh, no, this is too ambitious. Member states don't like it. But listen, if our core thinking of those who had the vision to establish European Union would be the same, we would never have European Union in the first place. Global supply chains are becoming increasingly volatile. We know that Europe and our economy is very import dependent and fragile when it comes to energy and materials, but times were good. And when the times are good, not many really care about that fact. Competitiveness and strategic autonomy can only be based in Europe on responsible resource use and management, including fossil fuels. And in short, circular economy is a European quest for competitiveness. Critical to remember is sustainability. It's not in opposition to competitiveness. It's a critical success factor for competitiveness, security, fairness, democracy, and for the coherence of the European project at large. And it's simply not good enough to constantly hear the same answer. Yes, you are right, but. To conclude, yes, unfortunately, it's not easy being green, as Kermit the Frog was very clearly explaining us already times ago. Sustainability transition, it's a major business opportunity. Why? First, it's unavoidable, and second, because any transformation for those who are innovative, those who dare, those who understand the essence of the challenges ahead of us, it's a major opportunity. Do the business leaders understand what are the major challenges, highest global risks for them? If you look in World Economic Forum each year, January, they are answering the same the same question. And this year, the results are like this. On the place number 1, among global risks, they have put extreme weather events. Number 2, biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse. Number 3, critical challenge to Earth systems. And number 4, natural resource shortages. Yeah, it's different than 2 years perspective, but they clearly know what are the major global risks and challenges. Unfortunately, the overall economic system, the shareholding and everything behind, it's basically organized in a way that if they would follow that what they know, they would very likely lose their jobs. Changing our relationship with the rest of nature, it's ultimately an economic equity security imperative to strengthen our collective resilience. This relationship between humans and the rest of nature is simply not stable. It's not balanced, and it will be resolved either with collective wisdom and effort or in a hard and very painful way through conflicts, pandemics, migration, and so on. So the future will be green, fairer, more equal, or simply there will be no future as we would like to have it. Since one of the clear facts is that we are indebting future generations financially and by depleting the nature, which is simply wrong, and we know that. Apparently, we humans are the most intelligent species on the planet. So it's high time to prove it. More than economic and technological choice, this is actually a moral choice. Since we started with philosophy, let's also end with 2 quotes. One is from the saying attributed to Socrates: strong minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, and weak minds discuss people. This is quite important to remember. So let's keep our collective efforts to discuss which are the ideas which needs to lead us in the right future. And in that, the most important advice, it's basically coming from the countrymen where I'm spending most of my time, Hercule Poirot, the famous Belgian detective, who was, when asked why he's speaking about himself, always in a third person, and he replied something like that: if one is such a genius like me, it's very important to establish a healthy distance to himself. Yes, that's exactly the challenge in front of all of us. We are not the first, we are not the last, we are not the only one living on this beautiful planet, and let's take that seriously with the responsibility which does include. Thank you for your attention.
Wow, Janez, thank you so much for this overwhelming presentation. Now I have to say that listening to you, I was sorry that we didn't agree for you to have 10 sessions, because this presentation, I think, holds topics that could be spread around 10 different
I know that.
A lot of information. You've touched politics, economics, environment, social problems, all of it in one session. So it's actually hard to steer the discussion, because we can do it in various directions. But before I ask my question, I thank you, Zlatko. He's applauding you. Also, I would like to invite the audience to engage in a discussion that follows. We have 20 minutes of the time for you guys to ask. You can unmute yourself, you can raise your hand, or you can put a question in the chat if you don't want to speak out loud. I know that most of you are probably overwhelmed with all the information that we just heard. So let me be the icebreaker and ask you, Janez, or maybe I should start with a disclaimer, because I'm coming from Croatia, and you had a slide where all the countries beside, I think, Cyprus and Croatia did not have action plan on circular economy. So I have to inform you guys that Croatia is actually developing one as we speak. I've listened to you very carefully. You are very critical towards the way our civilization is going, but you were mostly critical towards politicians. So basically, it seems that the wrong policy attentions are leading us the wrong way. But most of the people here in the audience are business people. So my question to you is, do you have a recommendation for them how they should behave? Because if they are waiting for policy incentives, it's luckily that we will be still holding on with our thumbs crossed in our pockets, waiting for someone else to start first. And as you already pictured so well, we only have very few years to make this transformation before it's going to be too late. So how should business behave at this point?
Miriam, a lot of basics of the economics, which are today creating the core of our behavior, was created decades ago with good intentions, with the understanding as it was. By the way, I have mentioned, not many are mentioning, basically that the global population has more than doubled. So when the Club of Rome released their famous limits to growth, 1972, it was 3.8 billion. Now we are 8.2, something like that on the planet. So yes, some of those things were simply developed through the time, and even the car at that time was actually, when it was invented, it was environmental solution, because the alternative was horse and their shit on the streets in major cities, And yeah, everything has its kind of moment, and you can't really foresee all the challenges which are coming when those things are basically part of your solutions. So I think we simply have to, and I do understand business actors simply have to follow, they have to follow clearly the incentives which they are getting, as well as we consumers. So I think it's absolutely hypocritical to ask also consumers to behave responsibly, but sorry, you have to pay more. It's not correct. This is not what we teach today in our economic faculties. So we need to work on economic incentives, and we need to work on that financial system will actually stimulate and follow that kind of developments. And I don't blame basically the business actors or the consumers, because I simply believe that at the end we are functioning in well-organized system, which has in history proved and delivered a lot of good to the well-being which we are enjoying, which was majority done all with good intentions. But we are understanding today that the side effects which we are collectively facing are something which we have to address. And resisting to that, it's simply not good. It's not good for the future business. It's not good. It's maybe good for tomorrow, but it's definitely not good, as you have seen from the slides, how the business leaders are actually understanding the challenges of the future. So we simply need to have a kind of agreement between the politics and business, because many times they are working in a connected way, that this is absolutely the way to go. So when I hear today that we need to focus in Europe more on competitiveness and that European Green Deal should be abandoned, it's passé and so on, listen, is anybody serious in Europe really thinking that European Green Deal is a problem to our competitiveness? Yes, we have problems with competitiveness, but that's to the lack of, we simply lag behind some of the others in some major technological areas. We simply are very, very fragile when it comes to energy and material inputs. So basically, all the things which I was explaining are the bread and butter of our future competitiveness, if we are serious about that. So don't really point the finger on the easy targets, because it's nice and everybody wants to hear that, and it's so easy to explain because it's on a simple individual basis. It's easy to prove that something which is environmentally more demanding and putting actually the responsibility on those who are polluting or who should pay it's for them more economically unattractive. That's easy. But all in all, we need to look to the bigger picture. And we can't behave at home like being the most careful parents for our kids and their future in the whole generation and the future of all their kids. But when we go to business, we behave differently. It's simply not right. So, but again, I think that the core of the problem, it's in the way how basically economic signals are given to the producers and consumers. And if we do not start seriously to try to amend that, it's practically difficult to change the situation. You are muted. You are muted.
I agree with you that companies actually are, you mentioned the capitalism, they behave as the market demands them. So they will switch very quickly if the policy or customers' demands show that they will. So, but they will not change the current successful, profitable systems unless they get clear signals that these systems are not there to last. But we are getting the wrong signals all the time. I mean, with the Ukrainian war, I think all the countries in EU subsidized energy prices, which is actually subsidizing fossil fuels instead of investing more into sustainable or renewable resources. So the signals we are getting every day are quite wrong.
That was why the beginning of my presentation was, we learn the only thing from history is that we learn nothing from history.
Yeah, so I'm hearing a lot from the people in Croatia and in Europe that it's not wise that Europe is, leading ahead with sustainability because it's costly, while the rest of the world is doing nothing, and that's what makes our economy uncompetitive towards the others. And I'm linking this to the question in the chat, which is from Melita, who is asking your comment on USA leadership and their approach to sustainability and their footprint, which you already mentioned is largest.
By the way, the first thing which I would like to comment, it's far from truth that the others are doing nothing. That's a typical defense when you don't want to do something. Yeah. American policy, which has terribly shifted in the last mandate. It was not much better during the first mandate of Trump, but even Democrats are pretty much business orientated, to be honest. Their policy, it's problematic, if I put it very mildly. I think that the direction which US has taken from the America first to America only, it's a very suicidal direction to go. And I don't know, maybe that's good if I look it in the perspective that this will so clearly expose the wrongness of the approach, which would never be done if somebody would not so extremely approach to that. But I firmly believe that this should and will be changed by a kind of internal opposition. Because unfortunately, Europe, it's pretty much toothless in that respect. We are very vulnerable nowadays, also due to Ukrainian war and the need of the American support there. And my point was always, I will never sleep bad because of the things on which I cannot impact, and I cannot impact on the American policy. It is not a responsible policy, clearly. It is going in the wrong direction, clearly. I simply believe that there are enough intelligent people in US that sooner or later this will turn and become different. But nowadays, the real worry is that manipulation of people, which is possible through social media and other channels, serving them the truth, which is actually not the truth, and trying actually to somehow simplify everything which is around us to the level of truth, which is actually suiciding. I think that's basically what is really worrying me. So people should think. And that's the most important thing. So it's not just following the things which are served to us like they would be the pure truth. But my advice would be choose few media which are, none is 100% purely neutral, but choose few media which you think that they are the most neutral and objective, and follow them, not other goddamn shit which is coming from our computers and phones. So I think it's really, really, really important to think and to understand that this objective looking to the questions, it's core.
You're basically telling us to apply critical thinking, while on the other hand, we do not educate our children to think critically. But Robert has raised his hand. So Robert, please, if you can unmute and ask your question.
Thank you very much. The talk was really impressive. Thank you very much. And I totally agree, and I'm thankful for the analysis that we received today, especially the focus on growth and the problems that come with economic growth. The one thing I was missing in the talk, you've been, in regards to the solutions, you've been saying that political regulations are necessary. In regard to the backlashes we see at the moment towards left and green policies, I'm missing one point, and those are legal measures. The discussion about nature being rewarded subjective rights instead of being considered an object. I think that's a big lever that could help in many regards the transition towards sustainability. Have you considered those, or what are your opinions on these legal measures to help the transition?
Robert, thanks. Good point. By the way, saying that a lot was said, but something is missing. My summary is that probably you would want me to speak even longer. No, that's that's a joke. It's you are absolutely right. So one of the solutions which we are considering quite seriously, I talk with many, it's actually also giving the nature subjective rights. So yes, legal solutions are important part of the solutions. My point was just that, if the legal solutions are sending you left, and if the market signals are sending you right, then you have confusion. And I think this alignment that market signals should basically respect also the protection of nature, being also having a subjective rights concept behind, I think would be much better than actually one going in one direction and the other going in the other direction. But I firmly agree with what you have mentioned. So I think it's worth exploiting that direction, in short.
Thank you, Janez. I'm thinking about where this discussion went, and I'm realizing that we actually speak more about politics and policy frameworks than we actually do about options for circular economy in technological and operational ways. So is it safe to say that we actually have all the answers in technological way? We just don't have the incentives to change towards those? Because this is sort of a position of WBCSD, which is my global organization. They say we have all the answers, and we have the money, we just don't have the front runners or the policy changes which are needed.
It's a bit pretentious to say we have all the answers, but I do believe they have many answers from a technological point of view. If you ask me why circular economy is not actually becoming a norm or a global trend, I think the answer is pretty simple, because I have explained it in presentation. It's not economically attractive. So everything else, if actually virgin materials exploration and everything is more economically attractive, it's more economically attractive. So I also agree with the point of WBCSD that that those who are not heard enough and not vocal enough are exactly those who understand the seriousness and do want to do the changes. But you know, that's always like that. Those who have the problems are vocal. Those who don't have the problems are simply not vocal. That's the bitter side of all the policy making. I remember very well when I was sitting in the commission who was visiting us. Those with the problems, not those who were going well, you know, because those who have problems simply want to solve them, while the others are satisfied with the situation as it is. So I'm not a believer that technology is providing us with all the answers. I think that we need to combine the overall societal story, production and consumption behavioral story with the technological story, and then we would get to the right direction. If I would be provocative, you know, energy, it's just giving us possibility to do something. We can do it, we can do good things or we can do stupidities. That's what energy is allowing us. So, for example, food for us, for humans, it's energy. If we don't have it, of course, we can't live, and that's why it's essential. But if we have it too much, if we have the food which is not healthy, then we get obese, we get ill, and is that the direction in which we would like to go? Probably not. So the same is the story with the energy. So we need to ask the question for what the energy is used. So if you would provide humans with a lot of energy, even majority renewable, cheap energy, but not ask the question for what that energy is used, not ask the question of production and consumption wasteful patterns, it's basically giving us license to kill. And unfortunately, we will do that.
Thank you. We are running out of time, so we have 2 more questions in the chat. I'm guessing we only have time for one, but I will maybe just briefly shorten the first question, which is from Roman, who is discussing about that the change is not possible unless global financial systems are changed. And he's saying that current technologies could support financial change with global universal basic income based on the value of biosphere carbon and materials as principal financial asset. In the system, value of basic resources would be free for global population. And he wants you to comment on that.
I more or less agree with the statement. I think it's with AI, which is somehow sidelining the need for human engagement and jobs. I think we are heading towards basic universal income, because there will be no other option if we want that we don't end up with total chaos and wars and so on. So yes, it is global financial system which needs to lead the game.
Thank you. And the last question from Marina, to which I will add on. She's asking you to comment on the sustainability reporting and CSR directive and corporate sustainability due diligence directive of European Commission, do you consider them helpful? And I will just add on maybe at the end to comment on Omnibus and the fact that after we have set very ambitious reporting system and made companies do all the necessary changes, we are now stepping back. How do you comment on that?
The first answer is yes, CSR, it's important, and sustainability reporting, it's absolutely needed. On the Omnibus, it's, you know, in Omnibus, you have two things which are basically in the same package: simplification and deregulation. Simplification is needed, deregulation is dangerous. But since I was living in European Commission, and since I was responsible for an area where I tried seriously simplification, that was science and research, my conclusion at the end was simplification is simplification, because of all the requirements of member states that they would like to have the control. So it's a real dangerous that they will, due to that, focus on deregulation, and we have to carefully follow what will be happening in Omnibus.
Thank you, Janez, so much for putting it so clearly and to simplify the comment in a way that even now I see the picture of it. So yes, I agree completely. Simplification, yes. Deregulation, definitely no. But since we have run out of time, I would just like to briefly conclude. I got permission from Marina to close this session by saying thank you, by inviting everyone to keep joining our community webinars, because we will have more very interesting speakers and discussions following in the months to come. I hope, Janez, that this is not the last time we see you in this session, so we will think about narrowing your approach in one of all of the interesting topics that you have covered today. And I wish everyone good day, the rest of the day, and I hope you all enjoyed it the way I did. So see you next time, and thank you more.
Thanks a lot for the invitation, Mirjana, also Danica. And just one thing, you can share the presentation because I see that there are some questioning it. And if you want to get my email, just approach me via LinkedIn and I will share it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Great event. Thank you, Mirjana and Marina and Asel for organizing that.
I think it was very interesting. Yes.
Yes, and it's great that we can get the slides because they were very interesting too. Thank you. And we talk one of these days, huh? Good. Merci.